Okay, hi guys. Welcome to Nurburgring. Let me think. The Before I get started on the track itself, let me give you one tip that may be worth trying if you haven't yet. That could make a bigger difference than anything else I do in the rest of this video. So as you probably know, with the recent update to the consoles. We gained the ability to adjust our field of view. Um, that When it first came out, I started to use all of the calculators and that sort of thing to get the perfect FOV, and they just flat didn't work. There's something about it that I don't understand, or something is going on. Regardless, every result that I got from changing my FOV to what the calculators told me to use was absolute garbage, and I couldn't use it. Okay. Now, having said that, after playing around with it, though, what I did find was that just changing it a couple of clicks, the FOV actually helped quite a bit. So the default setting in the FOV is 54 degrees. I lowered mine to 52 degrees, and that actually makes a pretty significant difference on certain corners. And thus far, the corner or set of corners that it has made the biggest difference on is the chicane. Okay, here at Nurburgring. So that may be something that you want to try as well if you have not already messed around with your FOV, because the improved visibility makes it significantly easier for me to get through the chicane in a confident manner and consistently. So that is my first piece of advice for you. And let me find. Okay, so having said that, let's dive in. Okay, first turn one, hairpin. So generally speaking, pretty standard on how you should probably approach it, with the exception of having a little bit of options on the exit, and I'll explain what I mean by that here in a second. So first things first, your brake marker is going to be right around the 100-meter board, depending on what car you drive and how much fuel you have in it. But the 100-meter board is what I use. I do not think that this is a corner that you even want to try to double apex. However, I think it's one that you really need to do as a mid to late apex. So because of that, and let me see if um, the in large part the reason I think that is because this is a very tight hairpin, right? It's not. It doesn't have a more of a gradual curve like most hairpins do. As you can see, it's very much a sharp hairpin. So if you try to double apex this, I don't think it gains you anything. I think it can only hurt you and not help you. So unless you are attacking or defending, I think in all circumstances you should be all the way out to the left side of the track essentially for as long as you can. So 100-meter board is when I brake, and I will hold it for as long as I can out to the left side of the track. When you turn in, however, will depend a little bit on what you want to do as far as the exit goes. Okay. Um, this is a corner that you are going to you need to trail brake this one. It's an excellent turn to practice trail braking on. The only real dangers on this corner are pushing your braking zone too far and blowing your apex, or coming up short and getting too heavy on onto the curb here, particularly if you get the right side of the car up over the curb and into the grass. As you all know, this is just a little bit of a downhill right here, and if you get too deep into the apex here and catch the grass, it'll upset the balance of the car. When you combine that with the bit of a downhill that occurs as you're making the turn, you can and will spin the car on exit. Okay, so let's see. So, nailing your braking point is obviously always crucial, but if for some reason you make a mistake early and get on the brakes a little bit too early, don't compound that mistake by trying to take the apex too much, right? Your priority at that point is you've already lost the time, right? So don't try to gain it back by shortening the corner more, because all you'll do is put the car in the grass on the right side, upset the balance of the car, and then spin it as soon as you get back onto the gas, which you're going to be doing immediately, right? So resist that urge if you ever under brake and find yourself tempted to cut this corner a little bit too much. Don't do it. That's really the only big danger from this corner. As you can see, pretty late apex, mid at the earliest for me, and the actually let's go back because I want to talk about the exit a little bit before I. Okay, so on my exit, as you can see, I am really just center left of the track on my exit. You absolutely can exit this corner much wider, but it depends on what you're trying to accomplish and what your priorities are. Okay, um, you can prioritize the exit on this hairpin and open up the steering sooner, let the car run wider, and get on the gas a little bit earlier. The advantage to that is obviously that you get on the gas sooner, which is always a good thing. What you're likely going to sacrifice, though, is your corner entry for the next turn, the left-hander. The reason that I come out center left on this instead of farther to the left is because I'm prioritizing corner entry on the next corner. So depending on what you choose to do about that complex will determine what you do as far as your exit goes on the hairpin. Now, because I am prioritizing the next turn instead of the exit out of the hairpin, one thing that you will see me do is to hold my trail brake a little bit longer. If you're prioritizing your exit on turn one, you're probably going to get off of the brakes a little bit earlier than I do and open up the steering a little bit more than I do right here. Instead, I'm going to hold the braking past the apex just a little bit. That allows me to keep the weight on the nose and get it turned a little bit faster, and that's what lets me have the exit that is left center of the track. Okay, so if you choose to do it the other way, that's fine. Just let off the gas a little bit earlier, let off or ease up on your steering angle a little bit earlier. Opening that up will let you get on the gas a little bit sooner, and you'll just run wider to the left than what you see me right here. Okay, then that will determine what happens as far as this corner. My priority is this corner as opposed to T1. So coming out center left lets me get absolutely set up in a perfect position, at least the position that I want, that I consider perfect, to attack the left-hander, which can be a tricky one, right? It's a little bit blind, so it makes it a little bit dodgy. Let me tell you what I use for my my cue. I'll move the car all the way out here to the right side, and as soon as I get up here next to the access road, you'll see me start to gradually lift the throttle. Um, whatever you whatever you choose to do here, be careful with it because the back end can get light very easily, and when you're at the apex and just starting to exit the apex, this can be one of those traction zones where you're really fighting for traction on the exit. So you have to keep that in mind in whatever approach you decide to take. If you decide to prioritize the exit of turn one, you are going to have a much more difficult time getting your car out as far wide to the right side of the track as I do on the entry to this corner, which means your throttle and maybe even brake management is going to be a little bit different than what I use here. That's perfectly fine. It's a choice that you make. You're going to have to make a compromise somewhere, so wherever you do that, that's up to you. But whatever you choose to do, it has to be done smoothly because you're in a position where it's very easy to upset the rear end, either entering this corner at the apex or just after the apex when you're going back on the full throttle. So bear that in mind that whatever you choose to do, it needs to be done smoothly. Now, because I take a very wide entry into this, that means I do not have to get on the brakes at all, unless I just screw it up royally. But otherwise, it's just a gradual lift. My suggestion for you is that whatever you do here, whether it is a lift off of the throttle or a slight brake, make sure that it is gentle and gradual if possible. This is not a place where you want quick inputs because that's going to be what throws off the balance of the car. Okay, so off to the right side, I point the car right at that access road. As soon as I come alongside of it, I do a gradual lift. I don't do just a pop off of the throttle. I also don't go into a pure coasting phase where I have no throttle, unless I make a mistake and I don't have any choice. I will carry a little bit of throttle all the way up through the apex because I have enough grip to be able to maintain that speed. Now, one thing that you may find helpful, assuming you're taking the same approach I am, if you're inside of me taking a shallower line at entry, this may not work quite as well, or you may have to adjust it a little bit for your purposes. But essentially, as I come through the apex, when the yellow crane in front of us comes into my vision, if I'm on the apex and I've done my entry properly, I know as soon as I see that I can begin to pick up the throttle again. But again, it has to be gradual. You've really got to wait on the traction for the rear end to grip up, so that you don't get that back end sliding on you right here. Because if you do, it will easily put you into the wall over there on the left-hand side. So be cautious about that. The reason that I prioritize the left-hander as opposed to the exit onto turn one for a couple of reasons. Just from the feel of the flow of those corners, it makes more sense to me. So just a pure driver feeling standpoint, I feel like that is the appropriate way to take the corner. Okay, but the other advantage is that it allows me to, generally speaking, carry more speed through that apex of the second one and get back on the throttle sooner on an area that is a little bit longer than what the little short straight stretch is between the exit of T1 and the entrance to T2. So I feel that is a bit of a benefit. The other benefit is from the standpoint of attacking and defending. If if someone has not if someone has not been able to overtake you under braking going into T1, it's very unlikely, unless you make a pretty significant mistake, it's very unlikely that they're going to be able to overtake you um, in that very short stretch going from turn 1 to turn 2. Okay. However, that is not necessarily true for this stretch right here. Um, for if I am attacking someone who is if I'm attacking someone who is taking a wider exit out of turn 1 and a narrower entry into turn 2, because I already naturally come in wider, carry more speed through the exit and through the apex and into the exit. That puts me in an excellent position to cross over and undercut them on the exit to this turn and under braking into turn 3. Okay, um, if you go by this method, if you ever run into that where you're attacking someone who takes that shallower approach into turn 2, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about immediately. It also has an advantage from the standpoint of defense. As I said, you're going to have a hard time overtaking someone between turns 1 and 2. So I am not as worried about that from a defensive standpoint, right? I am, however, more concerned about defending into this corner. But because I take the wider line and maximize the apex speed and exit speed out of this corner, it makes it exceedingly difficult for anyone to get a better run through that corner and attack me going into this corner. So that's my thought process for why I choose to do those two corners the way that I do. Regardless, once you've made up your mind, you want to get back on the throttle, full throttle, as quickly as you can. Coming out of the exit here, you just need to be mindful that it's a difficult spot as far as traction goes. You absolutely want to let yourself run all the way out to where your right side tires are beyond the red and white striping here. Okay. I talk a lot about using all of the track. This is one of those places where if you're new to the course or you're still looking for speed, there's a good chance that you're losing time here because you are either not getting far enough out on your exit of turn 2, or you're starting to turn in too early into the left-hander turn 3. You want to be out here as far as you can. You absolutely can run into a track limit warning, so be cautious about that and learn where that is. But as long as your left side tires stay to the left of the white line, you're going to be fine. Let's see, the end of the green. The end of the green pavement is my braking zone going into turn 3. And these next two corners are very tricky, as you know very well, I'm sure. So let's go up to the apex of the right-hander, so we can talk about how we get there and why. Okay. You know you have a track limit issue on the exit over here to the left side when you're coming out of the right-hander. You also know that it can be very slippery as far as rear end grip, because it's another one of those traction zones, right? And I think that I can tell you that this is something that I did for the longest time, and I see a lot of slower drivers do it as well. And it is how they approach this particular corner right here, and that is that they approach it too shallow. So okay, so right here, mid corner at the apex, you can see that I'm going back full throttle right now. Okay, and I will not be in any danger of running afoul of track limits, nor will I have any grip issues. And the reason is because the angle of my car is good enough to accomplish that. In other words, I am pointed far enough to the right at the apex so that I can get back on the throttle right now and go full throttle without having issues with either the grip or the exit. I think what a lot of you will find when you slow this down and look at your replays is that you will be pointed farther to the left at this point than I am. Okay, and it's something I want you to take a look at and experiment because it has everything to do with how you're exiting this left-hander. Just like turn 1 and turn 2, right? You have to make a decision as far as a compromise goes, okay? Because you can't really exit maximum width on turn 1 and get your car over fast enough to achieve maximum width on the entry to turn 2. So you have to make a decision as to which one of those you want to prioritize. The same holds true for this combination of corners as well. You're going to have to make a decision where to sacrifice your maximum performance, right? Where you want to gain the time. Right now, there's an excellent chance that whether you've thought about it or not, you are sacrificing the right-hander. You're sacrificing your entry to the right-hander. And the way you're doing that is when you come off of the exit for turn 3. When you're at this point right now where my car is, the nose of your car, well, two things. One, you'll be a little bit further to the right than I will, towards the center of the track, and your nose will already be pointed probably at least to that yellow truck in front of us, if not to the right of it. Okay? So what does that force you to do? It means you have to use more steering angle and you have to slow down more in order to make the right-hander. And because you're using more steering angle, that also means you're going to be more subject to the grip issue that can come out on the exit of this right-hander. Okay, so what I'm going to suggest to you is, and this will be absolutely uncomfortable for you at first, because the timing of doing this is very tricky. It took me quite a while to learn how to do it properly. The timing of it is very tricky, so it's not something you're going to learn in 1 or 2 laps. But what I'd like you to experiment with is when you come out of the exit for turn 3, hold your steering over to the left until your car, the nose of your car, is pointed to the left of the yellow truck up there. As you can see on the left-hand side where the track borderline is, I am almost parallel with that track borderline. And you can see how far left I am on the track, very much left center. If you look overhead and you see the black tire marks, right? The bulk of the line is essentially right down the center which is where you're probably taking right now as far as the line goes. I want you to experiment and ignore that line for a moment and get to the left of it so that you can open up the right hander and give yourself a better exit. Because keep in mind that that if you come out of the exit on turn 3 here and open up the steering early, you will be able to get on the throttle faster than I will be able to. However, you only have 30 meters of track to take advantage of that earlier acceleration. On the other hand, by sacrificing my exit here and giving myself a better entry into this corner, I will now be able to get onto the gas quicker than you will because you were in the center of the track. And that advantage that I now have will last significantly longer because the next straight is much longer than what we just came off of. Okay? So that's why I want you to experiment with this and see what it does for your lap times. Because I'm willing to bet that if you are still one of the people who are taking the center of the track approach and costing yourself on the apex right here of the right-hander, if you can practice this other pattern and really nail it down, I'm willing to bet you're going to find a full half of a second in that corner alone. Okay, so that's why I think it's worth experimenting with. Where do I want to go? Okay, so think of the shape now that we're taking on turn 3, right? I want a very narrow exit coming out of turn 3 because my biggest concern is setting up for turn 4. That means I want to be as wide as possible out here so that I can straight line brake right into the center of the track, shift down to first gear, and get my wheels all the way over at least onto, if not to the left of the red and white striped curbing. And from there, you absolutely have to be patient. I'm well inside of the black grip marks at this point, and I'm going to stay there until I'm ready to turn in. Now here's the very tricky part about doing this. What you're going to do is, as soon as you're able to start straightening the wheel on your exit to turn 3, right? And you've got to be patient because you've got to let the nose get over far enough to make this work. But as soon as you can, get on the gas hard. I'm going to sneeze. I apologize, I think. Straighten the wheel, get on the gas. The timing, however, is very tricky because you are going to shift up to second gear, and at the same time you shift up to second gear, you're going to make your hard turn to the right and stay off of the gas, right? So you don't want to you're going to have this little coasting period here between the time you shift to second until you hit the apex. Notice I just start hitting red line right there. Shift up, get off the gas, let the car come around, get onto the curb. Now you can go. It's extremely rare that I ever run wide enough for track limits to be any concern to me whatsoever. It's one of the biggest big advantages. It's one less thing you have to worry about because your approach dictates a line that is not going to cause you problems over the course of the race. Okay, so let's go full throttle. so you can see what that transition looks like between turns 3 and 4, because that's the tricky part. Okay. Let me think. Is there anything else I want to say about that? No, I don't think so. It's just something that you'll have to practice if you want to try it. But if you do and it works for you, let me know, okay? Because I really think that's an important thing to experiment, and I'm curious to see how it goes for some of y'all. Okay. Okay, turn 5 is pretty straightforward. There's not a lot to this. Um, I think the only real issue on it, well, I'll say two issues. One, track width. You can see how far to the right I am getting. The newer you are at this track, the more of a tendency that you'll have your tires essentially right on the white boundary line. That's costing you time if you're still there. You need to practice getting the car all the way over onto the right side and get these cones out of the way, because they don't need to be there. They're just in the way. My brake marker, excuse me. My brake marker is the end of the access road. So I'm going to work the car all the way out here to the right side, take out any cones that may be there, and just as I get to the end of the access road, that is when I'm going to get on the brake. But I'm going to hold it out here past the access road, because you don't want to turn in too early on this thing. I would say, especially depending on where you want to come out as far as the exit, I probably do a bit of a later, I'd say a later entry than some other drivers might. The reason is that turn 6, this right-hander, probably the most uncomfortable turn on the track for the Lamborghini. It just doesn't like to turn in here very much at all. Pretty much regardless of what I do with the setup. So I have to sacrifice a little bit on my exit of the last corner to give myself an entry that is good enough for me to manage this turn consistently enough, right? So you may very well angle pretty much sucks. You may very well have a car that can attack this right-hander from the very center of the track, or even center right, something along those lines, and you're still able to get into the corner perfectly fine. If so, then that's great. You can be more aggressive on your entry and exit for turn 5 because you have a little more room to play with. Because I have to open up this right-hander a little bit more, then I make sure that my exit out of turn 5 allows me to get further to the right, over to the center right portion of the track, in order to attack turn 6. Okay, so that's the reason for my line, and you don't necessarily have to follow that depending on how your car manages turn 6. But regardless, brake right there at the end of the access road. No problem, I think, with a little bit of this curb right here. The Lambo is not good on curbs, and even it isn't troubled too much by this. If I get up on there too much, it might be an issue, but let's see how... Yeah, see, I'm up on there pretty far, and it really doesn't give the Lamborghini much trouble. So I think you're probably pretty safe to cut that a little bit whenever you feel like you need to. And also no problem with running all the way out onto the curb on the right hand side, if that's the line you prefer. No problem with that. As far as turn 6 goes, I think the thing that makes it so tricky is that it it feels much tighter than it really is, and I think that's because we're going on a little bit of a downslope at this point, so it makes the corner just a little bit off camber. I'm pretty sure that's what's going on, and why it causes me so many issues. So so it just it I have trouble really holding the line that I want to hold on this corner. It's like I'm either understeering and running wide, or the nose just really bites in there, and next thing I know, I'm into the curb a little bit, which I don't want to be. So it's just an overall uncomfortable corner in the Lamborghini. The one thing that I will say, regardless of what car you're in, and is that this is the first of, I think there are maybe 3 corners on this track where you need to practice opening up the steering earlier than what your brain tells you to. Okay, and the reason I say that is that your steering input is going to go largely off of what you see, right? So if you're looking up the track at this point and you see the curb that's up there, then that's going to be your brain's way of telling you when to begin opening up the steering. The problem is that it fools you because you have so much green off to the left side of this exit, right? There's at least what, 3-4 feet, I suppose, that's available. So if you go by what your vision tells you as far as looking at the red and white striped curbing, you are not going to open up your steering as early as you can, which means you're not going to get back on the throttle as early as you can, and you're not going to use as much of the track on exit as you can, right? So this is one of those where I'd be very conscious about where I'm placing the car on my exit to this corner, and if I'm not getting out here with my left tires at least touching the green pavement out here most of the time, then I would start revisiting where it is that I'm opening the steering, and practice doing it too early in order to develop a new feel for when you should be opening the steering. Because if you're not getting out here on your exit, you're losing time, quite frankly, because you're just not using enough of the track on exit. So that's probably the biggest recommendation, general recommendation I can make for that corner, and it will be the same that I make for a couple of other ones as well. Okay, turn 7. My braking point is essentially halfway between the end of the access road on the left-hand side and the beginning of the curbing down there in front of us on the left-hand side as well. Maybe just a little bit closer to the curbing. So a little bit past the halfway point, might be a little bit more accurate, but it's essentially the halfway point. And what I'll say about this corner is, as you all know, I'm a big fan of a late apex. Not here. I think trying to do a late apex at this corner is a mistake, and it should be a double apex essentially for everyone all the time. the corner is just flat out quicker that way. I don't think I've seen any really quick, esports driver who does anything but a double apex here. So that's the approach I take on it, and it's the only one that I can recommend. So let's see. The only other, I think, real decision to make is what gear you take in this, and I think either second gear or first gear have merit to them and depend on the car and your driving style. So I've watched a bunch of the esports drivers through here, and you'll see a pretty good mix of whether they take first or second gear through this. I prefer to hold it in second gear and just use my brakes to do all of my slowing for me. If I think if you're a little bit less confident on the brakes, that could make first gear a better option. If you're one of those people who are still a little bit too stabby, on the brakes, and you haven't quite developed your skill yet where you can really massage them and control the balance of the car with your braking, then staying in a higher gear might be a little bit tricky for you. So I think especially if you're newer at this track, first gear is probably going to feel more comfortable, but you can absolutely take this in second gear as well. A lot of people do, and I do. And then so you'll just let's look at this from that angle. Oops. So you can see that an obvious apex right here at the beginning, and then I will allow the car to drift out away from the curbing right in the center. Notice I'm trail braking very heavily through this because I'm trying to get it turned. I'm actually too far away from it on this one. I blew it just a little bit, but the principle is still very sound. And then on the exit, just bring it back in for a second apex. And other than being a little bit wide, they're mid-corner. That's essentially a textbook double apex hairpin, right? You can go a little bit wide on this one, as I did here, without costing yourself too much time. What you can't do is you can't afford to run so wide that you get out into the marbles there on the left side of the track. If you do that, you're going to lose all of your grip, and and put yourself in a really bad position. But if you miss it by a couple of feet, it's really not going to hurt you too bad. Because you're going to get the car turn a little bit sooner, which means you can get back on the gas a little bit sooner, and you can essentially make up that lost time that you missed by being a couple of feet wide. So it's not that big of a deal. This is another one, however, that I'd be mindful of when you're opening your steering up. When we were racing here at Parc Ferme a few weeks ago with Parc Ferme, one thing I noticed with some of the drivers who aren't as quick is this is another one of those corners where you will hold the steering for too long and not take advantage of all of the track width on the left. So just like turn 6, you need to train yourself to open up the steering early enough so that you are getting back on the gas early and taking advantage of the track, the green tarmac on the left-hand side, because you really want your tires to be all the way out here on the left. And understand when I say that I don't mean that you steer over to the far left of the track like this. What I'm saying is that you are doing a combination of opening the throttle, or excuse me, opening up the steering enough early enough, and applying maximum throttle soon enough that the momentum of the car requires you to come all the way out here, right? So you're not aiming for it in the sense that you're actively trying to steer to get out here. You are simply using the maximum momentum of the car on the exit, which forces you out here, which is what you want. Okay. So that is the second corner where I think you need to be mindful of when you're opening up your steering and make sure that you are taking full advantage of the exit on the left-hand side there. The Schumacher S's. I'm not positive what to say about these because they've never given me a ton of trouble. What I'll do is I'll tell you this. I'll tell you why I don't think they've ever given me a ton of trouble, and that is because very early I identified a a visual marker for my turn in on the left-hander. Okay, and then I just practiced that over and over again until my turn in became very ingrained within me. So if you look up to the left-hand side, you see that black piece of asphalt that's very obvious right there on the left-hand side. Okay, let me switch over to my actual driving view real quick so you can see exactly what that would look like. Um, Before we get to that point, the curbing on the right-hand side here, you absolutely can run your car up onto it a ton. I do. I would say not every fast driver does, but probably the majority of them do. So you absolutely can run all the way up here in order to give yourself as much room as humanly possible, right? And then once I get up here, my eyes are going to the apex up there, but in the peripheral vision, I have that black piece of black piece of asphalt in mind. And what I'm doing is I'm waiting for that to pass out of my peripheral vision. That gives me an indicator that it is now time to start my turn in and to lift off of the throttle, right? So as soon as that passes out, I start my turn in and begin coming off of the throttle. Okay. This was a very good lap, by the way, but I actually missed it here in the Schumacher S's. I turned in just a hair too late, which put me about a foot or two wide of the apex here on the left-hander, and as a result, made me a little bit further to the right on the next corner as well, but not enough to kill me by any stretch. But what I'm looking to do here is to get either right alongside or even up onto this curb just a little bit. If anywhere from left wheel on the white line to left wheel just right up on top of the red and white striped curbing would be what I would consider ideal for me taking this corner. Okay. I think, let's see. Yeah, you can see I'm a good 2 feet or so off of where I would like to be ideally. And because of that, two things actually. Because I missed it by a couple of feet, I actually had to lift a little bit more than I would like to. Generally speaking, when I hit this corner correctly, my lift is to right around 50% throttle. But because I missed the apex slightly and turned in, I had turned in just a bit too late. I had to bleed just a little bit more speed, so it's more about like 35% maybe, something along those lines. So it did cost me just a little bit of speed there. And because I was fighting that, that put me a little bit far on the exit to the right side. Generally speaking, my again maybe 2 feet to the left is where I would be, So I was 2 feet to the left back there, or 2 feet to the right back there, and I'm 2 feet farther to the right than I would like to be here. But still okay. You have a bit of a window there where you're okay. But obviously the important part of that is on the right-hander there, that you don't go too far to the right. Because if you get into the Um, if you get into the sand over there, then that's going to ruin your day. The other thing I'd watch for that I think can be common, especially in the mid-engine cars, is if your ride height is set too low, you can absolutely bottom out on this corner right here on the right-hander. So if you that is something that happens, you must raise your ride height enough so that that isn't an issue anymore because you can't be running scared through this corner. You've got to be able to attack it at full throttle. You know, otherwise you're going to be costing yourself time. And then, assuming you attack that right, you should naturally just run right out up onto the curb out here on the left-hand side again. You know. Okay, this is another corner where I see a lot of people who do not get wide enough on corner entry because at this point you're over as far right as you can go, and I think the tendency is you just kind of stay there, right? When the reality is the track opens up a few more feet to the right. So essentially, what I'm aiming for from this point is I start steering my car right over to the 100-meter board. Um, that's where I'm trying to place my car because I want my right wheels all the way over to the white boundary line that is now further to the right than it was. My braking point is all roughly halfway between the beginning and the end of this tarmac section, probably just a little bit closer to the 100-meter board when I'm running a low fuel like I am on these laps, and closer to the middle portion of it, or maybe just a little bit shy of it if I'm on a full tank of race fuel. So get your car all the way over here, right? I mean, it opens up a lot. Use it, right? Make this your new line so that when you go on braking, now you can see that I'm absolutely using all of the track. That opens the corner up. That allows me to carry more speed, gives me a better angle into the corner. It's one of those. It's one of those tiny little details that either costs you time or earns you time. One of the two. Let's see. This is another one where I think you have a bit of a decision to make as far as how you approach this corner, and specifically, I mean the exit. So you you absolutely should be all the way out here to the right hand side, like I am right now. You should be essentially going for a mid corner apex. This is a pretty basic 90-degree corner, so it's just a mid corner apex where your wheels should be running right up onto the curb, in order to shorten the corner as much as possible. And then from here, you have a little bit of a decision to make because this is another corner where you have to decide where you want to give a little bit because the the next corner. The next corner is the trickier one in my mind. So you absolutely can, on your exit here, you can open up, get on the accelerator, and run all the way out to the right, until your tires are on the other side of the red and white curbing. You absolutely can do that. I don't. I stay closer to the center of the track because my priority is to get as far back over to the left side as I can to open up the next turn, turn 11, right? So what you decide to do about turn 11 will ultimately determine what you decide to do here at the exit of turn 10. Um, and I will give you a little bit of advice on how I gradually progressed at this, combination of corners, to get faster at it. Okay, so we know that this is a tricky corner. It's relatively high speed and but also tight. And you don't have a ton of room to work with as far as the exit. And the inside curb here is one that you really can't attack. I mean, it's one that will screw the car up pretty bad. So you've got to be cautious on both your entry, both your apex and your exit, because there are dangers there on both of those. Um, so like a couple of the other, corner complexes that we've had in Sector 1, I prioritize my entry into this corner over my exit from the last corner, turn 10. And the reason I do that is because we have the very, very long straight coming up leading up to the chicane, right? I want to maximize my speed on that very long straight. I'm less concerned with losing a touch of speed on this much shorter straight. So that's why I approach the corner the way I do. So my priority then is to get the car all the way out here to the left side by the time I go to tap the brakes and make my entry into turn 11. So however wide you decide to go on your exit here to turn 10 will dictate whether or not you can get back over to the left side and set up turn 11 in the same way, right? If you have a car that can go max exit, and utilize all of that track over there on the right side and still get back all the way over to the left in time to set up properly for turn 11, congratulations. I'm jealous. I can't, right? This is about as far over to the right as I can go and still feel confident that I'm going to be able to get back over to the left side in the position that I want to be in. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about these two corners, because they're absolutely connected to each other, and what you do will determine the outcome of the other one. So here's what. Let me go to my view. So here's what I do from a visual standpoint, because you don't have much in the way of good brake markers here, right? So actually, let me back up. Okay, so as soon as I make my exit, my eyes immediately go over here to the left side of the track. That's where I'm looking first, because I want to make sure that my car is aiming for the outside of that track. Once I get to somewhere right around here where I know I've got my car going where I need it to go, then my eyes shift back over to the right to the apex. And what I use for a brake reference is the fencing on the right-hand side. So when my eyes go to the apex, I can see the fencing off to the right side in my peripheral vision, right? And as soon as that passes out of my peripheral vision completely, then I know that it's time for me to go with the tap of the brakes. Okay, that's essentially my process for this corner. Now, having said that, you know that this corner can be very slippery. It takes a bit of skill, I think, on the brakes. I think this corner tests your braking. I really do, because it shouldn't be a heavy brake. It should just be a soft, short dab on the brake in order to slow the car and get the nose turned and pointed where you want it to go without upsetting the balance of the car. You cannot hold the brake too long, otherwise that weight will overshift and you'll start losing the back end. So there's danger here on the brakes, and all I can tell you is that that just takes practice. that gentle, that gentle braking takes time to develop, and it's something that you just have to work on. But if you if you need visual references, that's what I use. Eyes to the left, then to the apex. Wait for the fencing to disappear, then a short dab on the brakes, and I'm able to turn in. If you're still trying to brake heavily at this point, you're done. You're going to lose the back end pretty much every time. This corner, the exit, is the opposite of those where I was saying that you have to open up the steering earlier. This is one where the the mistake is to open up the steering too early. Okay, because if you run out too far, you don't have as much green curb to work with here, right? So if you run out too far and you put your wheels on the sand out here, you're instantly costing yourself a ton of time because it's just going to be like dropping anchor, right? And you're going to lose all of that time going down the straight. So in this case, you're much better off holding the steering just a tad too long than opening the steering just a tad too early. It's the much safer way to go. If you're on a hot lap, sure, go for it. Try to be perfect. But during the race, it's better to keep in mind that your miss needs to be inside as opposed to outside. Okay. And I take that corner in second gear, turn 11. I think most cars are probably second gear, though there will be some that are third. I think probably the Porsche, for instance, for sure, would probably take that in third gear. But I think most cars will be second gear on that corner. But otherwise, you just wind up with too much understeer. Okay, the chicane. Let's do this. I want to show you the line first because that's honestly the most critical part. So you can see where my wheels are placed. My braking point is, roughly half, about the 75-meter mark. There we go. I will hold the car out for quite a while. You do not want to turn in too early here. If it helps, look at the access road on the right-hand side, and you can see how close I'm getting to it before I really begin my turn in. From there, it's getting the left tires all the way up onto the red and white striped curbing without hitting that big ass thing right there on the left hand side, right? Because that's going to screw you up. And then doing the same thing on the right side as well, except even further. Now, this is another area where I want to talk about using all of the track, because I can promise you, if you're newer to this track or slower to this track, this is probably one of the areas where you're not using all of the track. I know I wasn't for the longest time until I really started figuring it out, and it's one of the things where when I mentioned playing around with your FOV a little bit, this is where it's made the single biggest difference. I can simply pick up all of my markers and place the car so much better with that small adjustment to my FOV, just lowering it by 2 degrees. Because what I want right here is same thing. I want my tires all the way up onto the red and white stripe curbing as I go past the bump on the right hand side, but I want to keep turning. Don't stick to the red and white striped curbing. Get your right tires all the way up here when you're making your exit. Okay. Um, you'll be shocked if you're not doing that yet. You'll be shocked how much it straightens this corner for you on exit and stabilizes the car. You'll be absolutely stunned. Okay. I mean, I'm out there a long way, and if the Lambo can handle it, I can virtually guarantee that whatever car you drive will be able to handle it as well. Watch any eSport driver, and I promise you that is the line they will take, and they will have their tires all the way up there on that green concrete every single time. I think one of the reasons why this this entry is so difficult is because where I've talked about before, where you have to learn how to be gentle on the brakes for certain corners, where it really makes a difference to be able to massage the brakes to to maximize certain corners. I think the same philosophy is absolutely true for the entry into this left-hander, but with respect to your steering. Okay. Um, I think it really takes steady, calm, confident hands to place the car where you need to place it consistently on the entry to this corner, right? When I talk about, smooth, this is the perfect example of what I'm talking about on this corner in particular. So I think if you're kind of all over the place and herky jerky with your steering, be confident in what you're doing and know that you're going to have the ability to make very, very tiny adjustments at the margins to be able to maximize this chicane, right? There's just not a lot of movement in my hands through there that I don't have planned in advance. So yeah, that's the chicane. Try the FOV if you haven't already. Let's see from the gear standpoint, I think it has to be a third gear. Unless you are still very new at the track, then and you just don't have the confidence yet, then save your life, take it in second. Second gear is also a fantastic option when you run into traffic, right? So it is a great way to give yourself a little bit of leeway so that you don't go running into the back of the guy in front of you, because you never know how the person in front of you is going to handle it. So it's a great way to give yourself just a little bit of a buffer zone. Drop it down to second. You can always get on the gas a little bit earlier if everything comes out properly. But nothing wrong with taking second gear there as a bit of a defensive measure. But for the real lap times, I think it's got to be in third gear. Let's see. Okay, so if you start maximizing that chicane, you will naturally start running up onto the curb on the left-hand side. Okay, but not necessarily every time. I want to be there every single time, and not just because of the exit that I get out of the chicane, but because it helps me set up for the final turn. I absolutely want to be up here. So once I get up here, I'm going to stay here until I'm ready to go onto the brakes, um, because this is a super weird, right-hander. This last corner is just really weird and kind of awkward, right? Um, and for the longest time, I took it in first gear. I never felt that was quite right, but it just took me a very long time to really get a handle on this corner so that I could comfortably take it in second gear. One of the things I do different now than what I did before was I absolutely get out here onto all the way up onto the curb until I go onto the brakes, which I do just as I come alongside the little light brown patch of sand on the left side there. From my view, you'll see just as I come up to it, that's when I start going on the brakes. Okay. Um, you can see that as I'm braking, I've started turning my steering wheel in just a little bit because I want to brake towards the center of the track. Um, it's one of the reasons why I like being all the way out there to the left. It gives me a better angle to come in to this apex. Okay, so hard on the brakes to the center of the track. Late turn in, late apex. Your apex is really going to be all the way up here, by the guardrail. It's pretty far up. So make sure you're not coming into it too early. From there, this is all about patience on the throttle. It's a long corner, so you have to wait for it. And it's also the last corner where you need to discipline yourself to make sure you're opening up the steering wheel early enough, because another one, just like what is it, turn 6, I think, turn 6, that when you look out at the curb, all you can see is the red, white striped curbing. You can't see the extra, 3 feet or more of green asphalt on the left side. So your mind will trick you to keep the steering closed longer than you actually need to. So if you find that you're not running out on all the way out onto the green on your exit, come back to here and work on your mindset. I must open the throttle earlier, open the steering earlier, and get back on the throttle earlier because I'm wasting valuable track. And as soon as you do, open that sucker back up and get out here. Okay, and so that's Nurburgring. I think it's a great racetrack. I really do. I really think it's one of the best racetracks for racing. Because it's got high speed, it's got low speed. Um, it tests you and the car in a whole bunch of different ways, and you know, it has some really good areas where you can overtake as well, and set up overtakes, not just, wait for them to magically appear because a guy in front of you makes a mistake. So I think it's not just a spectacular track to drive. I think it's a really good track to race on. So yeah, it's just a really good one. Okay, let's see. Let's stay here and do the full lap. This lap was a 54.8. 54,876. That's a good time for me. I can get into the high 54s, but not necessarily easily at this point. Pretty easy to get into a low 55, but I still have to work for it a bit to get into the 54s on a regular basis. What am I doing? Overhead. And that's Nurburgring, guys. Hawk, hope that helped. Okay, that's it. That's it for tonight. Let me think. As I shoot this, we're going to be using both Donington and Nurburgring as our qualifying tracks for our next season. So we're about a week and a half away from doing that. So hopefully this is useful for you all in preparation for that our qualifying stints that we'll be doing. Otherwise, I'll see you on track later this week as we get ready for a little fun race at Spa. Have a good night. Take care. See you later.